Yeah, I was supposed to have
my plan
panel yesterday.
anchor the boat and sleep on it.
And I got in there, they took
Mike
me
said,
up,
well,
and the
you can't
guy
leave it
came in and he's
unattended
like,
at anchor.
we're
And I'm
sorry,
like,
but
I'll be there.
whatever
Everybody else.
table.
I thought, well, I think that's already kind of fun. That's a ton of work. But so when Mike we did the deal with Jim, I thought, well, at least I'm not big yank on water. But you know what, after, you probably learned this years ago. After September 8th, 15th, the kids work.
Pretty much Labor Day.
Victor, what's the password again? I'm with her. 160 Zoll.
160 Zoll ST.
No.
Where not.
The boat gets dirty.
Gets filtered.
Yeah.
The bottom gets greasy. I don't know why all these power. It's a big deal. When you see them for resale, they say no bottom. So,
I won't be here. Great. Thanks for signing up, of course, so.
We'll try not to bore you.
Yeah, I just got back like an hour ago.
Yeah, I'm leaving mine in later this year because it's for sale.
Right, I figure you might get somebody to come and see trials.
But I arranged with Irish to get it all that 15, 30, whatever that.
I was surprised because I told Chris Berry, who bought 45 North, I just
No.
said anytime after mid-September.
Hey,
how are you?
I used to work every
And
time.
I was surprised they picked it up. I don't have a trailer, I'm like, so I had to set it on Jackson. So,
And, which network do you favor? Oh, wait.
always.
All right. I'm on 50 liter.
It's so silly.
Good.
Let me try that.
Hey, how are you?
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Quick as he didn't see.
Looked like a good time, good night.
Yeah, it was loudly.
Hey, girl. Once the hair extensions made it to the minister, you know you're having a good time, so.
Yeah.
Do I need to do anything?
No, because we're no longer.
Somebody's here.
No, it's back at this one.
No, I mean like to.
Yeah, it'd be March, he's getting his share.
Okay.
Yeah, because sometimes there's like a, no, you're fine, that's good, I was just muting, no. The reason I was doing that.
Yeah.
Was because sometimes there's
No.
Thank you. They can hear.
I can. 2 votes.
So I can just minimize YouTube and not worry about it anymore.
Hello, George.
Hey, how are you?
You don't have to worry about it.
Was this
Wheels and arms are down so low.
stuff here? Is that
Maybe somebody
draft
showed
of
us.
the new plan?
That's.
I was way up here.
I think that's.
I'm little to be
Oh,
this,
yeah,
but this is good.
Sharing my screen.
Oh, yeah, so next.
Oh, share.
Share screen.
That's the way I. George?
Yeah. Yeah, good to see you.
Good to see you. It's been a while.
Yeah.
What are,
Been so busy.
we're gonna go over that today.
Yep, that's all we're doing tonight, is that.
If you want to share, if you.
You know, I
stuff.
question myself on that.
You know, add some on the website.
It's like,
You just go back to share screen. And click
Work is
the
good.
website.
maybe,
Not so sure.
maybe I'll figure this out.
X, Y, Z.
And it's just in a land.
Traveling every other week for the last 22 months.
The,
Never missed everything.
yeah, week before. Been good.
Yeah, yeah, thank you.
3 times, 4 times?
Yeah, I declined that whole thing. That's too much.
Yeah.
Because he's leaving, I think, next week and he'll be gone for 3 weeks.
Right.
Right. No, that whole thing just got started. All summer until 3 weeks ago.
What do you do? Have them go Lotus one place and then start running.
Yeah.
Always
Yeah.
But some of that
around, right?
lingers beyond COVID, like, hey,
And Jack's got one too, so that's even more.
Yeah,
although some people like it closer to them.
So there are a lot of the towns that series goes to that are similar size, like this in Petoskey, and they have pretty strong commercial agreements.
So they like it. Yeah. They're.
Yeah, and obligation to show up.
The guys who run this are.
Oh, yeah, how was that?
Yeah.
It's not really the cost.
Yeah.
Deck chair and the Queen Mary.
That's a totally different.
The PDF of our special land use map. So the actual full map, or the future land use map. Those two maps.
Peter on it.
I'm trying to figure it out.
I think he sold
I go old school.
kind of board or
Last
years and his brother. I have to figure out his plans. Maybe.
Maybe just
Thanks, Mike.
I don't know if I can do it again.
Yeah.
Saturday.
I guess it was.
Yeah. I went down there that weekend.
Just go on and find some ladies.
Yeah, you know.
Side.
It is, yeah.
At least at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, too, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
I had one crowd on this floating.
Yeah, it
I didn't see that, it was a place to be.
Yeah, sure.
City privileges.
5:30, Apple time, Victor's always got it.
Yeah, let me check, right?
Keep going.
5:30.
5:30, all right, I'll call the meeting to order. Jeff, would you call the roll, please?
Absolutely. Beth Rahali,
Here.
Mary Catherine Hannah, oh, I'm sorry. I'm just writing down the list. Emily DeBay,
Yeah.
Jack Deegan.
Here.
George Pete. Here. Phil Holmes. Here. Mark Bidet. Here. Andrew Bowman.
Here.
Al Dyka.
Here.
And Max Bassett. Let's all welcome Max.
Max.
He's our new student representative. We have a quorum.
Moving on, approval of the minutes from the September 16th meeting. Any comments or corrections on minutes? Okay with me. Hearing none, do we have a motion to approve the minutes as drafted? I'll make that motion. Support?
Sure, I'll support.
Thanks, Jeff. All those in favor?
Hi.
Aye. Any opposed? Public correspondence. Is anyone here for anything that is not on the agenda? Either in the room or are we taking, remind me again, Victor, I'm sorry, we're taking input from
From Zoom.
Zoom.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll try to remember to ask that if I don't.
And there's no one on Zoom right now.
Okay. All right. Moving on to new and old business, master plan documents, specifically the future land use section of the master plan. Everybody got a copy of that in their packet. And just to clarify, Al had a question earlier, Larry, that's the existing as is version of the master plan. Now it's been amended in this process so far.
The future land use map, which is like on page, what, 68 or that you had in your packet.
Yeah.
Is the one that we adopted back in 2013, 14, something like that. And it has not been changed or amended since that time.
And then they added the materials out of the master plan, Jeff, those were all.
That's as it exists in our 2014 plan. So, and this really stems from, last time we brought in the existing land use map and the future land use map to have some discussions about that. We had some questions and concerns regarding what we meant by minimum density or low density, medium density. So what we provided this time was pages 53 through 59 of the existing master plan, which gives us what our definitions are. Basically, if you go online and look for, what density means in planning and zoning, it's just a measurement in residential purposes of dwellings per acre that would be, throughout your community. But nowhere did I see anything that specifically stated, here's what low density means.
Right.
So we define that in our master plan, what we mean by low density. And we've provided that here. So we can adjust that. We can leave that as it is. We can go with these definitions as they are here. We have low density residential, medium density residential, commercial, office service, waterfront, industrial, are the current terms that we're using with our descriptions of them. We can keep those, add to them, and then we have the future land use map where we can, choose, whether we would like to adjust where we, see low density, medium density in the future of Harbor Springs.
And I think the closest thing we come to a real definition of numbers would be the districts that are referenced, in that table on page 59. When we say low density, we talk about our R1 and our all of our residential districts, and then medium is really R2, and then RM and MHP. So those would kind of be, and I think last meeting, for those that weren't here, we were talking that if you look at the future land use map, it basically all is low density, or majority of that's low density residential.
Yes.
So we were thinking that with some of the goals and objectives we've set, does that definition of low density residential really meet, and I think based on most of what we've talked about, probably fits in R1. There's some tweaks to maybe R1 that would come down the road, but it's not. When you first looked at that map last month, we kind of thought, boy, this doesn't really necessarily match, but based on the definition of low density, it might do pretty well. So, might be helpful for tonight just to kind of organize things if everybody agrees. Just starting, this is a small enough number of pages. Maybe we just sort of start and go through page by page, not necessarily word by word, and just sort of offer comments and thoughts or adjustments that people think need to be made, if that makes sense to everybody.
Could I have the opportunity to provide a real short overview of kind of taking what we have done? Part of this is for Max's benefit, because he's like, what is this all about?
Yeah.
What are we talking about here? And because we have all 8 of you here this evening, we basically, all of the planning commission is here. We started out this process, I don't know, a long time ago, a year or so ago. We went through the background analysis section of the master plan. We made a bunch of changes. We adjusted a lot of things. You gave me a lot of comments. You have not seen that again, but that basically was a discussion in written material of the history, the situation in the city of Harbor Springs today. One of the most important parts of that was the existing land use pattern in the city, which documents how every piece of property in the city is used. Commercial, multiple family, 2-family, single family, mobile home park, industrial, so on and so forth. And that was all documented in there. It talked about population trends. It talked about the economy. It talked about the downtown area. We also had a chapter dealing with development patterns in the city. And we went through that a couple of times now. We've made some adjustment to that. It basically states, in general, the pattern of how the land is used here in the city has been well established over the decades. It really hasn't changed that much dynamically. Downtown is downtown. The boundaries and borders of that haven't really changed. The character of it, the livelihood of it has changed a lot over the years. Single family housing is basically where it's always been. Some of the original housing is still here. Some of that housing has been torn down and bigger houses have gone up. Some people have bought lots and put one house on multiple lots. We've had some new developments go in, not many over time, but we've had a few. We've had some multiple family projects go up. Off of Lake Street, we have a mobile home park. People a lot of times forget we have a mobile home park here in the city of Harbor Springs. And it's kind of over on Lake Street. It's up in that northeast area of the city, and it houses a lot of people, if you will, in that medium to lower income sort of housing category. It's, if you will, affordable housing. And we have, Jeff, do you know how many are in that park? 100?
I do not. But
Okay.
yeah.
There's quite a few. And not all communities like Harbor Springs can boast that we have a lot of affordable housing in this community. We've gone through goals and objectives. And we've maneuvered and massaged those a lot, which really kind of starts to verbally set the tone of where we want to go with this new master plan. What kind of adjustments we want to make sure, as the previous master plan said, we want to make sure we preserve and do everything we can to protect the natural resources in this town. And we've identified those: the flora, the fauna, the water, the views of the water, the views of the city from the water, and others. The water quality here in town, both drinking water and the lake. We've talked about the economy and the jobs. We've talked about housing. We've talked about, all those elements I'm sure you can remember. We did a community opinion survey. We still need to have a little section in the master plan that talks about that. I got to work with Victor and Jeff, and we just need to put together a quick summary of that input process we did last winter during COVID, because we had a lot of valuable input from that. We also had a couple of sessions that Mr. Mulder helped put together quite recently in the last few months. One was regarding housing and the other one was regarding short-term rentals. And so that information needs to be knitted in here. So now we're closing in on the future land use element of our city master plan. This is where we have a description of, in the map that's up there, kind of sideways, but kind of hard. North is that way, right? That we need to describe the kinds of uses of land that we want to see in each of the categories that are there. That very white area that you see is basically all of the single family residential area. Now, we've talked before that, well, maybe some of that should change because all of that land there isn't available. Like the Bluff, that strip of land south of Bluff Drive isn't available for development. A lot of the area on the west side of town that's big and open there, those are preserves. They're not developable either. So we need to maybe add a category that isn't in the current master plan that better illustrates where developable land could be and how we want to use that. So I think that's a change. The schools need to be designated something else also, because they're a big landholder in the city also. And so there's those areas that we can make those changes. So where we're at and going through the text, keep those things in mind. And if we want to bring in words that we had in the goals and objectives or reference those, we certainly can, and it would be appropriate to do so. With that was more than 3 minutes, but it helps set the tone.
You ended right on the one thought that I had from reading the whole thing, was that it was probably the best thing in my mind, and it's just one of 8, but is to sort of redo this chapter, the language, and make it match with the goals and objectives that we've gone through over the last 12 months, really.
Yeah.
So, and some of the, just boilerplate stuff, for whatever reason, the captions with the pictures sort of seemed out of phase with sort of what we've been discussing and maybe just aren't needed at all. But those are my main observations. And then down at the bottom, not to go too far down, but the portion right at the end where it talks about
You're on page
zoning plan in 758, that felt like it needed some attention, or just, I think a lot of that's probably required by the zoning statute, but it just seemed like some of that, if we work our goals and objectives into the upper part, it wouldn't be as problematic, but
Okay.
thought that needed some attention. But other than that, the industrial and the commercial, and as you said, most of our zones are pretty well defined just geographically and sort of historically. And then the one word, the one theme that I think that might be hinted at or intended but isn't really stated clearly is small town. So maybe instead of quaint character, just reference sort of a small town character. I think that might be more sort of in keeping with what we've been talking about a lot of.
Okay.
But
if everybody wanted to sort of chime in with sort of top few things per page, or just what jumped out at you overall, sort of open that up discussion.
Well, the thing that jumps out at me is our definition of low density residential. And that is kind of constraining the way it's written right now for what we might want to do in the future, or we might not.
Okay.
Because right now it says that it's intended only for single family residential.
Right.
And we don't know where, this journey is going to take Harbor Springs in the next few years. And that maybe residential doesn't mean single family residential anymore.
And I think maybe, obviously the name low density residential might still be adequate, but then as we go through from our goals and objectives, as we review the zoning code, we may redefine what our residential districts are. I think if we look at the table, I thought the same thing, sort of the verbiage of what low density is earlier didn't necessarily match the table in the sense that it just says residential under the supporting and compatible zoning districts of that figure 12. But if we redefine what residential is, or our residential districts R1, 2, and 3, that might be the opportunity to open that up while still calling it. I mean, the general trend is we want it to be relatively low density in terms of not probably multiple family, fourplexes and things like that. But it kind of seemed to me like maybe some of the language up top didn't match the table entirely.
Okay, so what I'm hearing you say, Andrew and Bill, is that on page 59 in figure 12 of the zoning plan, is that where it says low density residential for a future land use category, instead of just having R residential, we should really identify the zoning districts that is referring to.
Yeah.
R1A, the R1B, R1C, whatever.
And then if we
fits in.
change those, that by default is then our master plan is matching
Yes.
what we're calling out.
Okay.
Does that make sense, Bill? Is that?
Yes.
If we
And,
could we could make R1.
And on page 53, I think we ought to just strike the word single family from the first paragraph under low density residential, just in case in the future.
Right. And I think
we want something.
Well,
denser.
and really the table doesn't say necessarily, I mean, I think what we're considering in sort of most of this would be, an accessory living, not a fourplex and things, and that wouldn't really fall in low density. And I think medium density, that district probably is better defined than the low density, at least in terms of the districts that we call out. We don't really have many of those.
For all we know, the community may decide duplexes are okay in residential neighborhoods, or we may not, but we probably shouldn't hem ourselves in by having that word in there.
And some of that would come through maybe rezoning R1 districts to R2, because we do have R2 in the code already, but I think that I agree that it struck me as sort of not, that single family wording doesn't necessarily fall into what some of the things we might want to explore, and we might be caught, painted into a corner a little bit that way.
Larry, would it be safer to leave single family in, but add language to allow for interspersing of other densities of homes like duplexes and things? Because if we remove single family completely, does that open us up too much to people wanting to put in just much bigger projects than what we would imagine that we really want to see?
Well, the future land use descriptions are a guide. They're not zoning. We didn't change anything. It's how we perceive in the next 5 to 20 years, we would like to see that area of the city be used. Okay. Based on my 30 some odd years here, I don't see that changing a lot, given what I've seen over the last 3 decades. Now, are the next few decades going to make that change? Maybe. If we provide opportunities, though, for people to make the change, it may, if they can make money, laying it right out there. because that's what'll make it happen. Right now, I'm seeing things go on that are just like, are you kidding me? They're getting that much money for that house? No wonder people are selling land around here at every square inch of it, because it's extremely valuable today. We've never had a time like this before in the history of the city, I don't think. At least in the last 25, 30 years. Andrew, you've been here all your life. Al, you've been here a long time yourself. And this is unprecedented. You know, people are putting up 2,000 square foot houses and paying $1.2 million for it. Go figure. That doesn't happen every day, but it's going on right now, all around the country. It's crazy. Is that going to last forever? No. Okay. We do have a good stock of affordable housing in this community. Like I said earlier, in the mobile home park. Are there ways to expand that? Possibly. There's some land adjacent to it that's larger parcels that are in single family ownership right now. There's a possibility there. That's one of the things I've told you I've identified is maybe that's an area that should be expanded in terms of future land use for that market. That we've identified as part of our goals. I think it's going to be really difficult to take and introduce a 4-family unit on a 6,000, 10,000 square foot lot in this community. Just from what I have seen in the past.
I tend to agree. I think one thing that, and I remembered what it was about the zoning plan language, and that was part of what you said. And I think maybe the mechanism, because part of it is the idea, and then what's the mechanism going to be? And I think we have some good ideas, but we want the mechanism to match. And it was in considering a request to rezone property to the city of Harbor Springs, the city must consider the future land use map and future land use description narrative of this plan. And it goes on, the succeeding table should be used to evaluate. So we may get into more, we may be creating some new zones if we redo the zoning code a little bit more. That might be the mechanism by which, whether it's like an overlay, like we discussed before, right? This would be a, whether it's single family housing preservation overlay that we try to, entice people to not become short-term rental, something like that, or it's okay with, this area, we want to change the zoning from R1 to an R1, T that's has another, but I think the table, because that is called out in that way, I think the table should provide a little bit of flexibility in terms of, okay, we want to consider rezoning this. We don't want to make this language prohibitive to rezoning something if that is the way we go. Does that make, there's a better way to say it than the 30 seconds I just took to say that, but that's the paragraph that sort of gave me concern for if we are going to try to rezone some stuff, this table becomes pretty serious in the sense that somebody could look back at it and say, well, this isn't in your table. You shouldn't rezone this block because of X, Y, and Z. So.
And that was just my concern there. If we completely struck single family out of low density, and then we had a low density area and someone said, well, I own these 7 lots in a row on Sargent Street, and I want to put, 6 unit buildings on each lot.
And I think as long as the zoning code that's called out in the table doesn't allow for that, I think you're on pretty firm ground. It's just not in low density, right now we just say residential. Maybe if we do put in the R1C, call out those districts. So if those districts don't change, then the ability doesn't change. If the district changes, then the options change. And I tend to agree that, multiple unit buildings in most parts of the city probably are not, going to be prevalent. But there may be a few small areas or a general new zoning district that we want to create, and this would sort of preclude us from using it.
Yep.
So that makes sense to everybody.
Yeah, let's leave our options open when we get to the zoning code. Let's just not rule anything out or close it out now by being too specific.
Yeah. And I think if that top paragraph, or that second paragraph under zoning plan remains basically unchanged, then we have to be real cognizant of what's in this table, right? Future land use map. So. Any other going up to,
All right, I guess with Bill's comments and with Jeff's comments, let me work on single-family neighborhood and massage that a little bit to provide and a window for opportunity for alternative densities or housing types
Yeah.
that are single-family oriented, but maybe attached together.
or even,
Okay,
you know,
or different types of housing.
yeah, I think maybe it's enough to identify a few of the, not the missing middle as a name for a
Right.
program, because those programs come and go and it's very we know what it means now, but we'll know what it means in 5 years. But sort of the ideas that were maybe some of the things on the lower end of the meter from the public session that we had would be okay to sort of identify those,
Okay.
Including but not limited to type stuff.
Yeah, there's quite a movement nationally to allow duplexes in every residential zoning area without special approval. And whether we're ready for that, I don't know. But I mean, we'll go to the community and we'll find out down the line. Let's just not rule it out.
Right. No, I understand, but and we don't want it to be used as a weapon against us either.
Right, and I think as long as, and eventually, I think by taking out that one word in the master plan of single family, or doing what Larry said he's gonna do, is just sort of add opportunities behind it.
Yeah.
Okay. Then I think we're pretty good. Any other thoughts on moving up to right under chapter 9, future, sort of the first page?
Before we move on, not a big deal, but I actually like the word quaint. You said you might want to. switch
Oh,
to
just, I like
town.
small town mixed in with it. I don't care if it comes out or not. So.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I keep it, people describe this town as quaint, not small town, so for what it's worth, I like that word.
Page 53, any other thoughts or comments on that? And again, I think Larry's gonna go through this entire section with sort of our
Goals
and objectives in mind, and then get a draft to review at our next meeting. So,
Quick question about the process. Larry, is the plan at the next meeting to then look at the map and see if we want to expand or contract or keep the same or future land use map?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Yeah, we're looking at the language, but you also need to be thinking about what's on that map. Of what these areas that we're describing, where they are in the city. I know you're all familiar with it, so are there areas there that we have as low density? No, we really should take that and expand it to medium, or no, that should be changed to some other category. So that's something we can do with this process also, and what we need to think about. Yes, Beth.
I had a question about the primary objective of this plan is to retain the views historically enjoyed from upgradient properties. Now, as I read it, it sounded at first to me that the primary objective was to keep the views pleasant for the people that have the big houses. Am I just reading into it?
yeah, I read that. That's where I sort of made the comment that maybe the captions for the photos were sort of out of phase with, and I think and then you read in the context, it seemed more sort of in describing why we don't want development on the bluff. And I do remember when we did this last time, there was some big concerns about intrusions really from the bottom, building into the bluff and destabilizing and things like that, or people being able to cantilever out and actually build on the bluff itself. So I think that was perhaps not worded perfectly, and I do think we just sort of do away with that. One thing, I think, by updating the map where it shows the bluff itself is not to be developed, that's probably a less cumbersome way of addressing it, because it certainly reads like we're going to maintain the view of the town for
People that live on the bluff,
and
and it's really the view for everybody.
right. So I think that is not a good way to put it.
But you can't buy the view just because you bought a house on the bluff.
Right.
Doesn't give you.
And there's enough elevation there, unless we let the buildings downtown go 10 stories, they're always gonna be fine. I think it really was not worded necessarily but as I remember from before, the discussion was more about how do we, because there is private ownership of the bluff, a lot of it, how do we preclude somebody from actually building on it? And I think since this was done, the bluff ordinance was adopted that basically gives anything, they identified a certain grade and a toe of the bluff. You can't go beyond that without certain proof. So I think there's much more strong measures in the zoning code itself that take care of what this concern was, which was building on the hillside itself. So that it didn't come out that way.
I know there is one lot at the end of Spring Street above
Yeah.
the bluff. There's a legally defined lot right by the boardwalk.
Right. Yeah.
So I believe the person has a right to build a lot.
I think that one,
And what do you do there?
I don't know, that would fall under the bluff ordinance, you know, where the zone, part of the zoning code that deals with intrusion into the bluff.
There's multiple properties along the bluff on the east side that have that situation where there are basically lots or parcels that are completely just the bluff and nothing but there was language done, I believe, Emmett County and the building department did something back around 2009. So I think we had a couple situations north along the tunnel of trees where properties were built too close proximity to the bluff. And they had some destabilization issues with rainwater and other things that came in to be a factor. And they established a certain grade that if the grade was over a certain amount, you can't build on the property. And they identified then through GIS all along the whole bluff from Harbor Springs north, I think all the way to Cross Village, where that was and you couldn't build. And then we adopted similar language in our zoning code, identifying the toe of the bluff and the head of the bluff and that nothing could be built within. So
And I think a lot of
to some
those-
extent we've
A lot of those lots were created when the houses up above bought the house on, say, Third Street, parceled off the bluff section and then resold the house down below. So it's to the benefit, they're common ownership a lot of times of up above. So that was, sometimes it's the same tax ID number, sometimes they aren't, but the ones I've seen. Any other comments on the OVA?
Yeah, I just need some clarity if you guys can help me. On the first paragraph, full paragraph on page 54. There's a sentence in there that says the bluff contains natural springs that are valuable, and it goes on to talk about subject to subsidence. And I read that and I don't know what that means.
Agree. I don't know if that's the right word.
Yeah, that really puzzled me.
And again, I think that goes to the trying to make it harder to build on it, but I don't know whether
I
that.
think they're saying that whatever you build might sink.
Yeah,
But shouldn't we clean that language up so it's clear?
Yeah.
maybe a different word than subsidence. What is the word?
Well, I think they're referring to like if somebody were to receive a subsidy for work that they needed to do to their home to stabilize it from erosion issues.
I thought it was the root subside.
Yes,
Like disappear.
but subsidence also means like,
Sink.
All right, if we don't receive,
seems like we've got enough.
Yeah, sink.
it's floating.
Yeah.
So we could possibly just redo that to say it in plain language
Yeah.
about what we're
Yeah.
trying to do there.
That would be helpful for me.
It's not stable ground.
Yeah. Got it? Thank you. Good point.
We're gonna move on to medium.
Yeah. Low density area was sort of odd in a way that the bluff referencing is all under low density.
Well, it's in the low density area.
Yeah, I guess it is identified in low density, that's why it's in there. Okay.
That's why it's in it.
Medium density,
My takeaway there is that we said that this kind of housing, two-family dwellings and senior are valuable, but the last paragraph says we're not going to encourage their expansion. And then later we talk about seniors aging in place. It's kind of harsh language. And I don't think we need that anymore.
Back when we did
You're
this
on paragraph
plan,
one, Bill?
Yes, I am, under medium density residential. Yeah, the last sentence says, new uses or expansion of these two anywhere within the city are not anticipated or encouraged.
You think we need more senior citizen places developed in town other than the ones we have?
We might,
Right?
you know, our population is aging.
How's that gonna help us with the young families and you're using land for the aged, which is appropriate, but part of our issue here is struggling with getting younger people.
It's one of our challenges, I think.
Yeah,
But again, in terms of what we're working on today, I don't think we should be hemmed in by language that rules out something we might want to do or the community might want in the future.
I don't think this does that, but I don't think I anticipate a need for housing, more housing for the aged at this point. I don't think that's been a goal.
Okay.
I guess the one,
By aging in place though, I mean, there's a big trend to being able to stay in your house and not have to go to somewhere special as you get older.
Right.
And making your, facility more livable, more flexible. And that would be senior housing, your own house.
question for you.
Yeah.
I don't read it like
Should we even-
that.
Senior housing as a category is a special category, but there's all different kinds of categories under that umbrella of housing, whether it's worker housing, this level housing, that level, that type of, all kinds of stuff. Do we even need to have a discussion in future land use for under medium density residential that qualifies who our target population is?
No, I think it's a good point.
Okay.
I mean, I think if
Because
it's
we
all,
have
if it's.
senior housing, we have worker housing, we don't mention that. Well, it wasn't an issue when we did this plan several years ago. We have identified that though under our goals and objectives. If we pull some of that language from goals and objectives and put it in here, that may be the appropriate thing to talk about the housing density, the housing types we're thinking about. Who occupies them? That's up to them.
Yeah, it's
We
sort of
can't-
odd that-
And that's something we can't control.
It's sort of odd the way this is,
Yes.
that it takes two-family dwellings and senior housing and sort of puts them in the same sentences together. And I think you're on the right track of just cleaning it up and just referencing, medium density. And I think two-family dwelling might even be too specific in and of itself. Maybe, again, we use similar wording from the missing middle,
Right.
types more so than just identifying a two-family. Because it may, the medium density may come from smaller lot size. It may not come from, it may still be single-family houses, but we may end up modifying some of the districts to allow for more density. It isn't necessarily more density on a single lot, it's just density in the general district. Whether those are smaller lots or, I don't know
Or it's
why.
clustered.
I don't know why it would necessarily be two-family houses all the time for medium density. It might just be
Could be
more
different
density,
solutions.
just on the same piece of property.
It could even be smaller houses.
Right.
Physically.
I think listing some of the more modern ideas that we've come up with in the goals as possibilities, again, not necessarily we're gonna, the community may or may not want to pick some of those versus others, but
Yeah.
listing examples more than just saying two-family and senior housing, that seems sort of odd.
I thought it was also what I
Well,
heard.
while that does seem odd, I think it is important to recognize though that these assisted living facilities are completely different than having like a worker type house.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
there are employees, there are ambulances,
Institutions.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
institution.
Like Bluff Garden, in, up on Lake Street, I can't think of the name, up just outside the village.
Yeah.
City.
Jack, is that what you were thinking of when you were mentioning senior housing? Okay,
Yeah, more like a,
like a place, institution. All right.
and maybe just and I think the wording that, and maybe it's just enough to take the sentence out or parts of it, the last sentence you could either just remove it, or take out anywhere in the city. I mean, that's pretty absolute, so.
What sentence you want to take out?
Just on the first paragraph, or just by saying, and again, we're gonna probably change the whole paragraph or change the fact that it just says 2-family and senior and just describe some of the housing types that might be, allowed for in medium density residential, of which, those areas are pretty small, that we're even, talking about. We don't have a lot of medium residential identified on the map, but I just saying, not encouraging expansion anywhere of these uses anywhere in the city. That whole sentence may not be necessary if we just update the first part of the paragraph.
Okay, why you brought that category up? Everyone can see the map. I'm looking at the one on the screen over here, and you're probably looking at the one over my head. We have up in the northeast corner of the city. The green areas are the medium density residential areas, mobile home park. We have right below that a purple area, which is the category of transitional residential. Is that
No, it's
No, it's
office and service.
office service? That purple category along Lake Street from Ottawa all the way to Hoyt was given that designation because we started to see some transition of houses wanting to be low impact businesses. And so we created that zoning classification to accommodate what appeared at the time to be a trend, which didn't happen. I think we had one place convert, which is the second house west of Hoyt Street on the north side of Lake.
The dyslexia.
Yeah. And that was the only one. But from that point to the west, down to the entry of the mobile home park, we have housing, we have some businesses there just south of the mobile home park. And then you have some larger single family lots. And in my opinion, that may be an area. In fact, I would even be as bold to say we could take it from Hoyt Street all the way over to the entrance of the mobile home park and call that medium density residential and change that category from purple to medium density residential and just leave that point where the from the front of the mobile home park over to Ottawa could be that purple category.
And that wouldn't conflict with the fact that we've got some businesses in there because you're not changing the zoning code, you're just changing the future land use
Right,
portion.
right. So just a thought as to, we're looking for areas to change, to add a different type of housing. In my brain, it tells me that that would be a good place to do that. Just a thought. Okay, we don't have to make a decision right now, just think about that. The other area that I was thinking about for medium density residential, this category, is the Bluff Garden area. There's a large parcel there. I don't know, can we point, Jeff? Again, that area there.
These properties right
A
in.
couple of those, but not all.
Yeah, maybe not all of it, and maybe not for the whole depth of the piece. But that's an area that has the potential for something other than single family homes. Just an idea.
Wow. Those are all turning into schools.
Okay.
It doesn't necessarily have to be a mobile home park. It could be something else like Windmere Pines or.
Yep.
And an option currently in the zoning code is to do a PUD. I mean, people could take an area like that and do a planned unit development which is a little more cumbersome, but it is, I mean, it is an option.
I don't know why that property is never developed. In fact, we've never even seen a development proposal offered.
I think they've been using it until sort of semi-recently, 5-6 years, as far as for.
For agricultural,
Yeah,
yes.
I think it was active. I don't, honestly, I drive by it every day, but I couldn't tell you if it was 5 years or 6 years, but it has, I think most of their agricultural stuff now is north of Lake Street on that portion, but I don't think,
Okay.
I think that's relatively, and when Say and Drive went in and that kind of stuff, that was the first sort of
Penetration. into the-
beachhead
yeah.
of residential in that agricultural
Mhm.
part of town, so.
Something to think about where if we want to try to diversify housing opportunities in the city, we have to change something. Because if we don't change anything other than some words and the zoning code, nothing's ever going to happen. If that's the target we want to head toward. But those are probably the two areas in the city that I see the biggest opportunity for the type of housing to be constructed. Whether it's a segment of the tiny houses and attached houses in a planned development idea, okay, it's possible on either one of those pieces. Because the projects in the city aren't going to be big, land-consuming uses. They're going to be smaller.
Sort of infill.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, we don't have a 30-acre piece in the city where somebody could do a big development. I think the last development that I saw was Easy Street, maybe. That Al did a long time ago, and he knows how long ago that was, and I think they just sold his last lot, finally.
And Hubbard Cottage is down on where Heinz property was.
Oh, yes,
The
yes.
Originally was, I think, where the point horses were kept. That's
Yeah,
how
and
long-
Second Street there, yeah,
Second between
second, third,
second and third.
yeah, over on the west side.
Well, and the significant, just so everybody, refresh my memory, I mean, the significance of changing it on the future land use map, it's not law, it's not binding, it just would provide some guidance towards, okay, these are some areas that we would consider or may want to consider more dense projects or development. That accurate?
Does anybody else have any suggestions for medium density residential? When you look at the whole map.
I think, again, to have the map filled in with park areas, community areas, it will really help, I think, crystallize for people who aren't
Yeah.
quite as familiar with it, how few and far between the pockets of that there are. So I think you've identified the two in my mind.
Okay. Yeah, from Lake Street north on the east side of State Street, you got school property over there, and you got the ambulance service, and you got the shopping center, and the industrial area where we have, DPW and bus garage and stuff like that up there.
And another area that has larger lots, and I'm guessing that it's so well established that neighbors probably aren't necessarily going to be too in favor of it, but Leighton Park plat, sort of behind the IGA, that.
Yeah.
But I think people really seem to enjoy that feel, and that's where we've gotten a lot of comments, I think, against short-term rentals, understandably. So it's just, I don't necessarily think that that's an ideal spot for it. If they got together and came in and said they were in favor of it, that's one thing. But I think as far as us,
Dictated.
yeah, I think OS has always been a little strange. Not strange, but in terms of the zoning versus the uses, it's got a couple commercial. One commercial went out in the last 10 years, probably since that was done. I'd be in favor of at least identifying that as an RM possibility, a medium density possibility. And then I think the Bluff Gardens portion, there's some utility challenges on that end of town, but I don't think they have sewer there. I think they might have water, but not sewer. Is that?
They do not have sewer.
Yeah.
I don't know about water.
Yeah.
They do have water.
They have water, but not sewer, right? Okay. So, but that's all, this is down the road. I don't personally have a problem with identifying those two on the future land use map as medium density.
I know in the Leighton Park area, if you haven't driven up and down all those streets, which I did last summer, is there are a handful
Handful of vacant lots.
of people that own two lots.
Yeah.
Double lots.
And the lots are 66 by 132, I think.
Yes.
That's a little bigger than some of our other areas, but,
yeah.
I think would be more of a neighbor-driven request.
Yeah, I don't see it changing a master plan designation to.
There are a lot of people that have gardens in there. I mean, I think they're using some of that, and enjoy it. The houses are all different sizes. I lived in one that was 380 square feet in there, so that there are some smaller ones in there. So,
Okay.
but,
We had a house up there for years.
yeah, we're in Washington.
It was a great neighborhood to raise kids. So.
Yeah, I think they probably kind of like it as it is, but I guess maybe it's enough as a draft map, not as the final map. We're gonna have a draft map that shows schools,
Right.
conservation areas, wetlands, parks. Most of the wetlands are conservation areas, fortunately, or city-owned properties. And then maybe we add that as a draft element to have those two designations change. If anybody have thoughts on that, one way or the other?
No, it's fine. I have another area that it is interesting to me. When you go up Harbor Street, north of Lake, all the lots on the east side of the road are huge.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
If somebody like me went in and started buying those up and putting them together, you'd have an opportunity to do a development in there. It'd be pretty easy to put together, I think.
Okay.
So I don't know if that's a good spot, but there's a lot of other more dense housing up there with the trailer park, Windermere Pines.
Because those back up to Windermere Pines, don't they? The back
I
of
think they do.
Yeah,
Yes.
Ottawa backs up to Windmere,
yeah.
and then after Ottawa, you have Arbor Street.
So Ottawa's the one that would be.
Ottawa's kind
The
of in
west
the-
side of Windermere is the east side of the back lots on Arbor,
Yeah,
Yeah, and then
on Ottawa.
Ottawa.
and
So
then
you got
I-
Windmere, Ottawa, and then Arbor.
Okay. Going west.
Yeah, and part of the reason those lots are so big is the current zoning for the west side of
Is
Ottawa and the east side of Arbor, it's AR zoning, which is our agricultural residential, which has some fairly large requirements.
We run into one that we were trying to sell. It was a garage. It was basically a 3-car garage with residence above it. And you looked at it sitting on a lot and it's got space on all sides. You couldn't change anything because it was the minimums are so big, and it's because it was AR.
Yeah.
So they couldn't add a deck or do anything.
So one thing that they could even possibly propose and do is just request to be R1C
Yeah.
instead of AR, which would allow for much smaller lots and more homes than along there. And I think I found notes going through old minutes where they did make that request in the late 80s or the early 90s, and some of the property owners on Ottawa liked having less stuff behind them and they ended up not making the change.
As far as
There's a big hill there too.
once you go far enough north.
Yeah, once you get to the north end of Arbor Street toward Quan's Park there.
The flat part, where plastic practice fields are, there's schools, tennis courts are in there. That's a huge empty area. I drive that all the time.
Right.
It just surprises me how low the density
That's
is.
why, because they are.
Yeah.
I guess as far as a draft map changes, I mean, I personally think, things like this, I think those are two good ideas, but as far as other changes to the map, I think the main thing is gonna be adding the things that are already there that make all this seemingly low density residential area that you could expand. Paints a better picture of what's actually available.
Right.
The CBD, I think is well defined and well established and, probably the right mix. So I don't see a lot of other changes to that, but as far as the medium density residential language in the on page 54 that Al started and Bill had some comments. Are there any other comments on that? I think we'll kind of not have this sort of odd theme of senior housing being really the main thing that's talked about in here. So if that makes sense to everybody. Commercial. Any thoughts on commercial?
In the zoning language.
Yeah,
I
on
would,
page,
I could, I'd like to see the allowed uses, tire vulcanizing removed from the definition.
what's that? Tire vulcanizing.
Yes.
It remains, it's been a big problem, yeah.
I think I
Is
heard
that
that
still in
right.
here?
That must have really smelled when they do that. Is that where they psych tires? Is that what?
Yeah, it actually doesn't smell that much, but it just, the thought of it scares me.
Yeah.
That or a foundry.
Yeah.
Good.
Any thoughts or strong feelings one way or the other on the commercial future land use?
You gotta take that language, you gotta think about boundary that's shown in the map, as the three red areas that we have. Okay, up along State Street there at the corner of State and Lake and downtown. Those are our three primary, those are our only three areas really in the city. And there, we don't really get requests to expand it.
I think the
Over the
one,
years, I
the
mean,
one
very-
thing that's more of, can be handled more on the zoning code
Yep.
is, we have CBD, which I think everybody understands pretty well, B1 and B2.
Yep.
I think those could be looked at, with our goals in mind.
Sure.
And really be, but again, that I don't feel expanding I don't recall many requests, if any at all. The only request I ever recall related to commercial is converting something, we had a few kind of islands of CBD or B1 or B2 that didn't necessarily make sense and we've realigned some of those, but probably not all of them.
Yes,
And
yes.
Third Street is obviously our sort of transitional area. As you go east, it very much shifts, towards residential from CBD, but most of those houses look at businesses on the backside. So I think that's where we're, but
Yep.
does anybody feel any need to really, I don't think we're necessarily getting a lot of interest in expanding the business districts.
Okay. Any other thoughts or ideas about commercial designations?
The only thing I think that we've run into over, that would, and it's hard to do because you can't spot zone them, but maybe some recognition of, longstanding, grandfathered businesses that are not in a central business district. They're pretty hemmed in by intent, but sometimes that complicates the continuation, which most people seem to enjoy. So I guess, again, that gets into a zoning code thing more than this, but it isn't a map change, but it's just something.
Okay. Okay.
Talking about some of the non-conforming use.
Yeah, I mean, like
commercial
the old
businesses.
Squires building that was down, I think it's Squires, that was down.
McGregor's.
McGregor's, yeah. It was L'Esprit, it was a commercial, but then it sat vacant for a while and lapsed and became residential. So I mean, that kind of thing. But maybe that's
Okay.
more of a off topic.
Yeah, there's a few, and then there's the hairdresser place that was down on that side.
Yeah.
And then there's the flower shop right over here. Yeah.
And then up on Lake Street, there's the other,
Yeah.
Ronaldo. So anyway, that's just something maybe as we go through the code. Here's an exciting one. I know everybody has been here, Max. This is probably why you got on this planning commission, was to talk about the office and services district. So here it is.
Go ahead, Max. What do you think?
Does anybody have any big thoughts on office and service? Not that those aren't important.
And that's that purple area map, right?
Yeah.
That we've talked about maybe eliminating.
Yeah, I mean, and I think in terms of, obviously, whatever you do with that, you gotta account for what's there. We don't want to make a bunch of grandfather non-conforming.
But maybe we could take our talk about expansion areas of our multiple family to add office.
Well, we did
service.
do that corner property at Hoyt and Lake.
Yep.
We did modify the office service district a little bit, I think, or talked about it. I don't know whether it ended up being necessary in the end.
I think is that TRO or is that residential?
That might be TRO. Maybe it was TRO that was.
Yeah, zoning of that.
It was an odd zoning,
The,
right?
the one on
next
the
to it.
corner of Lake and White.
And the garage behind it, there was a.
Yeah, no, that's in the residential office services
Yeah, that
zoning,
is ROS.
yeah, ROS district.
I think we changed ROS a little bit, but maybe it's enough to add more ideas of multifamily stuff into ROS.
Right. Yeah.
Any other thoughts on office service?
Well, that was created.
So does the office and service, that includes the new, I think it's Irish, their new like storage building they put up, does that include that?
It might be just over the line into the industrial, where the laundromat was.
Okay.
And then they put the two.
Yes, that Irish or, no, that's
Wallstrom's.
Wallstrom.
Yeah.
You fooled me. I'm thinking Irish,
Yeah.
they're over there
Yeah,
off
yeah.
of State Street. Okay, but that's in the industrial district.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
just that line, that property is the line.
Okay.
Our map though does show that parcel in the ROS district.
Yes,
in
it
our
does.
future
So
land
she's cleaning up
Yes.
where the
Yes.
boundary actually is of
Yes.
that. So.
So that was, the little party store used to be in that.
Yeah.
And,
Oh, yeah.
and the place where the barber shop is, and then the offices with the residential.
Yeah.
above.
With Jules Lorenz place, that's where we.
Jules Lorenz, yeah. The then mayor in Harbor Springs was not conforming. He was in that district with his commercial business.
Okay.
Or it was zone residential, that whole
That's
strip
right,
was
yeah.
residential.
Right.
And he wanted to expand his building business. So he pushed that through and we rezoned that we created the whole new thing. That was you.
The ROS, yes.
The ROS, we
Yeah.
created it to accommodate him.
And that actually extends all the way down to Ottawa. And you have the Benchmarks building is in there.
Right.
And then it kind of ends and caps with, right at the corner of Ottawa, who's the gentleman that has the house there?
There's a house there. Isn't the corner itself vacant?
Bob Antilla's house. is there,
Yeah, he was the president.
Yeah.
Moving on to waterfront. Comments or thoughts on the language? And again, we're gonna kind of look at that in light of the goals and objectives.
Right.
Hearing none, moving on to industrial. We don't want to expand that.
We don't, well, think about the idea of, do we want to change that boundary? I don't think so. It goes from Zoll Street all the way down City Park.
Covers the marinas and the, sort of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think we want to change that boundary, but just think about it, make sure we, this is important once we get to that point, making decisions. Okay.
Industrial. Make that a lot bigger.
Yeah.
Run that through maybe Glen Drive.
Right.
So I know you guys have been smoking something.
That's the industrious district, not the
Sure.
industrial. Yeah. And then we kind of get down to page 58 with the zoning plan. We talked about, I assume that first paragraph is sort of boilerplate that needs to be in from.
Yes.
From the zoning act. That's the right word.
Well, it basically, when the 2014 plan we did it, it was the first time it was ever introduced. So that just became an introduction to why this is here.
Okay.
So maybe we don't even need that anymore,
Okay.
that
If
paragraph.
you don't think we do, I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's. And that whole zoning, it was sort of an odd, do you need that title at all, the zoning plan? I mean, I guess.
Well, it's a section that we have to have because of the statutory provision.
Right.
You have to have a section that deals with
Why?
how are these master plan designations going to relate to your zoning code?
Okay. But you think the first paragraph could modify or go?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Any other thoughts on that section? We sort of covered it earlier. And then we're down to the table, and we sort of talked about the table earlier. Any final sort of thoughts on
Andrew, can you restate what your vision for the table is?
I think the table, instead of just saying residential under low density, put it and, you know, we call out specific R2, and maybe we ought to add, maybe it'd be enough to add, you know, the office services, you know, some of those things to medium density now that we've talked about it, but
Right.
identifying specifically under low density that it's R1, C, B, and R1, A, B, and, or R,
A, B, C, and E.
E, so I always forget. So
That's right.
identifying those, and then if we made changes to those districts in particular, that table is sort of supportive of the idea, because the above that, in the second paragraph of the zoning plan, we talk about if you're gonna rezone something, you know, you need to have it be supported by that table. So I guess that's why.
I don't understand, I'm not confused by that third category, additional potentially compatible zoning districts. You know,
What other opportunities in the low-density residential district are other than those traditional zoning districts, could I develop a residential property? And the option is planned unit development. Or actually, we have
potentially
the,
compatible zoning districts.
right, we could add in clustering, because we have that option within our zoning code. Or there could be others that we create.
But down, we get to like the commercial CBD B1 and B2, don't you have some of the same options to some degree where you can create special uses with a PUD or something? I just don't see how these all relate together in that category.
We have, since we did the master plan last time, we did develop a commercial planned unit development, which the Mossberg project where the whole old hotel was,
Right.
we applied it there.
It's a CBD
This
overlay.
CBD overlay PUD. So that's been, since we can add that idea in here under commercial.
But I think, but the definition, yeah, that's sort of, I guess my point, like there's maybe other things that we might develop here that we just don't know about, because I think the definition for the overlay district, no other piece of property qualifies anyway, right?
It's very defined, you're right.
Yeah,
It's very
so
defined.
I just wonder if we, by saying not applicable, or maybe we should say to be developed, to be promoted, to be something other than just not applicable, because it sort of like shuts the door on making changes.
Yes, I think this time we can open that up to, you know, to be developed.
Yeah, we
Or
don't know yet. what it might be.
To be determined, TBD.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or could you say something effective, you know? Any districts that may be developed in, you know, under the zoning code, you know, from the time this master plan was drafted. I mean, because there's some way of just saying, it has to obviously be something that's we put into the zoning code that you could then, that would be applicable, not just anything to be determined.
To be developed to enhance or to advance the goals and objectives of the master plan.
Yeah.
Well, is that what that last-
Well, I'm thinking specifically of the commercials, you know, the 3 commercial districts, because as we just said, you know, the B1, B2, you know, I think there's, you know, I think those will evolve over time.
Yeah.
You know, I think those aren't really as strong as they can be. I don't think everything should be CBD by any means, but I do think that there's B1 and B2. I think there's a lot of opportunity there, whether it's, you know, maybe, you know, a bigger nod towards residential or increasing density for businesses because we're so limited. I just think that there's, you know, specifically in that, and we just speak about, you know, the office services, that's going to be changing and evolving.
Yep.
And I just think we're, by not having some language in there where it's not being as clear as it can be.
Sure.
Is that kind of what that fourth column does with the evaluate
Well,
factors?
that's why
and features to-
that's why I sort of wonder if that third category is even needed. You know, that was my original thought, actually. You know, it's like, because it's not really telling me consistently good information. I just don't clearly understand it. So whether we work with it more, as Larry is suggesting, you know, is saying we can do, or whether we eliminate it, I don't know. I just find it a little confusing.
Okay.
I can see just dropping it almost.
That was my original idea, actually.
Yeah, because now that you
It
read,
was.
if you read even the it says additional potential compatible zoning districts, determine eligibility for. I mean, we're gonna be creating those districts within the zoning code, and then we would be able to evaluate them based on the right-hand side and say whether they apply or not.
Yeah.
But you can't name something that doesn't exist yet, so why not name anything?
That's right.
I think dropping it.
Yeah.
Or,
Okay.
again, the draft would be.
And this table isn't requisite or supplied by anyone, is it? This is completely.
This
made
is
up by
unique
us.
to Harbor Springs.
Okay.
Yes.
We can change it.
Okay.
Any sort of final thoughts or anything we may have not covered on the discussion so far? Good. So our next meeting,
Should we get some public comment?
I figured they'd raise, but if you'd like to comment, no, you're always
I have
welcome.
lots of comments, but I have to be careful what I say.
to.
No, it's something actually I'd love for you guys to think about is some mixed uses. I mean, you're very much commercial, industrial, residential. And I think a very common thing in the world where
Yeah.
the US is mixed uses, where we're seeing more mixed uses of things. And I'd love to see you guys pay some attention to that.
I think that's a really good
Touched on
comment.
and described.
And the good thing is in the CBD, you can do mixed with residential.
But even beyond the CBD, I mean, I think we need to expand our.
But I think there's B1 and B2, I think are right for that as
Yeah.
the business office area, I think
Or
for
kind of
mixed
on the-
use type of
Yeah.
structures. You know, you get a lot of bang for your buck for mixed use.
And it's-
It helps
I
the
think it's
community,
something that we
diversity of the community. as
really
well.
shied away from in this town. And I think we need to not do that. I think we need to look at it.
That was sort of my comment about how to, some of these that are sort of on an island as far as the zoning goes, grandfathered in, the reason they were, that trend, for a little while, long ago, they didn't want to have residents above businesses downtown. Well, that's obviously, that was late seventies, eighties idea. So I guess that is something, and B1, B2, I think, you guys both touched on it. When you read that one, that's the one that seems to be probably the most
It's a good starting
plucked
spot.
from,
It's a
the existing boilerplate in 76 and not really tailored towards Harbor Springs over the last 30 or 40 years. Just hasn't come up much. We don't do a lot. Usually the request for B1 or B2 has been to convert it to residential off the edges, sort of eroding that a little bit.
And I think we've got some opportunity that we don't always take,
Yeah.
that we need to look outside our box a little bit more. Because it could be really exciting and really make us much more attractive to younger families and young people. And I think we need to look at some of that stuff. That's my comment.
And so that's
I don't know
maybe,
about you, Mark. What's your comment?
I was told to behave.
Now
You're doing it.
now you're starting.
Isn't he doing a good job?
He's gonna listen now.
now.
So just sort of summarize for our next special meeting for the planning commission, we have an updated zoning use map. I think that's the most, is that a reasonable time period to sort of color in some of those, even if it's, not final. I know these are harder to develop, but
I'll reach out to Benchmark. That's who has put together our maps so far.
not to take work away from them, but is there a graphic design, somebody that could just do sort of a draft for us? And I don't know, does it need to be done by civil engineer as far as surveying it? So, I know they have these. I didn't know if there's somebody
It's
that,
just, this is a computer aided drafting map. It's-
Yeah. so if they have the file,
If
it's
they can, if
easier.
they can get a half hour or an hour, they could do what
They could mark them.
they could mark them up really.
I just don't
quick.
think computer editor.
No, it wouldn't take long at all. And even if we get a big color copy of it, we could take some, markers and just hand mark it up ourselves. if
Just to
we had
mark up, mainly community districts like we've been talking about, I think just to put the areas that are not really ripe for development because they're parks or schools or whatever else.
Yes,
Would be
yes.
helpful. And then you'll take a draft of the pages we just reviewed.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So with that, are there any member comments for anything we didn't discuss this evening? We usually at this point almost forget and then review the schedule of the next meetings, but next master plan meeting would be November 4th. That works for people, generally speaking. It's hard. And then the next regular meeting is Thursday, October 21st. And we do have things on the agenda, so we need a report. I mean, and 6, we have special land uses, or
We have one special land use request, and that's for another basically 2-story garage with living quarters above. We have 2 requests for some sort of structures that they're on commercial properties, so they need your review.
so we need
But it's pretty
minimum of
simple.
6. for
We
the-
need it, well, and I guess to further clarify on that, for voting on a special land use, to pass the motion, it requires 2/3 vote of the majority of the
Right.
board,
So 6
which
favorable.
means you have to have
votes.
6 yes votes.
1 no. And it's-
So, yeah.
So if everybody can kind of look at their schedules, going into October 21st and let Jeff know if you're going to be absent. That'd be great.
Also, I know Victor and Matt are working on a new member for us. We have some applications, they said, at the council meeting Monday night.
Well, Max, you made it. You made it to your first meeting, so.
He's awake.
All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you.
If any of you have any other thoughts or ideas as you